We just don't drink that much tea. It's that simple. It's actually not that simple. It's a bit more complex than that. Hi, my name is Evan Edinger, an American-born British YouTuber who makes videos on interesting things, such as this. And a couple weeks ago, I made a video where we looked at British sweet shops in the US and kind of were judging them on what they had in store. But the things that you guys were more blown away with was my mispronunciation, misnaming certain items that British people take for granted every single day. Kettles, teapots, kettles, Wasserkocher, you know, that type of thing. Except I would refer to them as a tea kettle. And oh my God, did British people get angry. What do you mean tea kettle? Say kettle or teapot, they're different things. Was ist der Unterschied? Well, there actually is quite a difference, but in terms of why Americans would probably just use the word tea kettle, let me explain. First off, like I said, we don't really drink tea that much in the States. It's not a huge thing. Like culturally, you might be able to drum it all the way back to the Revolutionary War. We threw tea in the harbor, and that was more than just an act of defiance against the taxes that the British were putting upon the colonies, but it said more than that. And once we finally got coffee discovered, well, America was like, this can be our drink. This is ours. We don't need tea that the rest of the entire world drinks. No, we've got coffee. And so that's one particular reason. It's not too strong a reason, but culturally, yeah, we don't really drink it that much. The other big reason, well, kettles just aren't really a big thing because the grid in the US is not the same as the UK or the rest of the world. The UK, we run off of 220 to 240 volts, and the US is less than half that, at 100 to 127 volts. What's that mean? Well, smaller number means it takes a lot longer for an electric kettle to boil water. I remember when I was a kid having just a standard electric stovetop, that took ages and I hated it. Well, it's because we don't really have that strong of current for that. However, if you did have an electric kettle in the States, if you did obtain one, you would find it was faster than just using a standard gas hob, but marginally so. Not necessarily enough for everyone to drop what they're doing and get one. Because you could say, well, Evan, it's more than just tea. I also want to use it to boil water so that it's quicker to just make pasta. You boil water really quick in the kettle and then just pour it on in. Well, like I said, if it's only marginally better, I don't think many people would want another device in their kitchen that just does something marginally better than another thing, especially if that thing is just boiling water. Like if you're cooking, you might as well just throw a pot on the stove. It's not that big a deal. Plus, today's day and age, I'm gonna be honest, I actually do not own a standard British kettle in the UK. I own one of these, and this is actually a coffee kettle. You can use it for tea. I mean, it's got a nice little gooseneck, but I use it because I can get the temperature exactly the way I want for brewing coffee at, you know, my standard 12 grams of freshly ground per 200 milliliters of water at 95 degrees. In this guy. But when I make green tea, you know, if I do want to make tea, I can get it down to 80. I will have a link to this lovely kettle that I've been loving in the description if you'd like. But another one that I use when I just want bog standard tea, a pot, okay? It's not that fancy, but I have an induction hob now. And induction hobs mean this is so fast to boil water. I don't know if you've tried it recently, but compete. Put your stovetop pot on an induction stove and then also try just using your electric kettle. The difference is actually so minor that I just don't really need an extra appliance in my house. It's just not something I necessarily need. Now, back on the US front though, there is an issue in terms of why I called it a tea kettle. Some people are like, there's a huge difference. Of course, a kettle is used to boil water. I did use the German word because I think it's lovely. Wasserkocher, water cooker. You know, that's its primary purpose. And then you pour the boiling water, or whatever degree you want, into a teapot to steep, to brew the tea, and then you serve it there. So that way you can have loose leaf or whatever you want in your little infuser and whatnot. But because tea is not a big thing in the States, because it's such a niche thing, it's more of a niche market. It's not like you'd get a kettle at any old, you know, home goods store. You go to a specific tea store. I remember going to the old Cherry Hill Mall and there was this one tea store right at the entrance. I was like, oh, it's so fancy, luxury kettles. Like that's kind of the market they're going for. People that are into tea in the States, they're a bit weird. So you can sell them things that are a little bit more expensive and a little bit more fancy, but also you don't need all these different devices. You just need a tea kettle, okay? It is a stovetop kettle that whistles when it gets to boiling water, and you can also just infuse the tea in there. And I know a lot of you are like vomiting in my comment section, like, no, they did not. Yes, it's almost akin to putting pasta in cold water. I would not do that while waiting for it to boil. But if you just want to save a couple steps in America, you can just throw the tea into the tea kettle, and then just boom, Bob's your uncle, Fanny's your aunt, you've just sorted yourself some nice tea. And you know what? Before you go cry about how this is an atrocious act of inhumanity, I would like to remind you that there are quite a few Americans that care about tea so little, they, first of all, drink Lipton. Secondly, they would just put it in the microwave. Now, I know there's a lot of like react bait stuff on the internet right now, on TikTok and whatnot, of Americans pretending they do some crazy acts. In fact, I myself made a video 8 years ago, which was clearly a joke about how Americans make tea, if you want to watch an old Evan video. But the thing is, it's true. A lot of Americans do actually use the microwave because they're like, why not? You don't know any better. It's like a lot of British people I know just have instant coffee because they can't be arsed to figure out how to actually make coffee taste good. A lot of people have to add milk and sugar because it tastes really bad because they're not actually making good coffee. But I think there's a really good quote I saw on Reddit I talked about in a video once, which was, good tea is tea, good coffee is good coffee. You know, there's a bit of a difference, okay? But either way, the reason Americans don't really have kettles, 1, we don't have good electricity that makes it really that good of an investment. 2, culturally, we just don't really drink tea. And 3, because we have freedom, all right? I've seen a lot of articles recently of everyone online bullying Americans who have recently found out that kettles exist. There was a New York Times article being like, hey, there's this device that we discovered called an electric kettle. Boils water fast. It is quite funny. But at the end of the day, different cultures grew up with different things that they wanted and valued, and here we are. We all grow old together, appreciating each other's differences. So hopefully, just a bit of positivity on this video. Hope you learned something. Now, there were a couple other comments outside the teapot, tea kettle debate in my comment section I wanted to talk about, so I enjoyed that whole bit being in one take. But now we're moving on. We've got someone said, you're clearly not British if you think that tube train was a pillow thing. It's obviously a draft excluder. Now, when I first read this comment, I kid you not, I was somehow trying to piece together what bit of the zeitgeist I had missed out on, what cultural phenomenon, not to understand that a pillow might be a reference to someone who doesn't want to be enlisted in the war. Until I realized they spelled draft like that. Why? Dracht. So I was thinking someone's getting drafted into the war, which to be fair is also spelled D-R-A-F-T normally. But no, it's just to block wind. Sure, that makes sense. I've never really needed one. I feel like most houses I've been in the UK have been fire safe doors. And if there is a bit of a draft, I just kind of deal with it. I don't like the clutter of having a draft excluder. Trying to avoid the war of the wind. Also, Sophie here chiming in saying that British people definitely celebrate Halloween. Have you tried TK/TJ Maxx? You know, it's becoming a thing due to America's influence, I will say. And I really like Halloween. It's a nice little wholesome kind of holiday, and I don't like dressing up in costumes. I really hate when people throw costume parties because I'm like, why do you think I'm gonna spend money, like a large amount of money, for a throwaway costume for your party? So I usually just do the Jim Halpert thing of just putting on like a bomber jacket and being like, look at me, I'm a bomber. Or I'll put on like a varsity jacket and be like, look, I play football. Listen, don't try and charge me 50 quid for some type of, no. Just not my thing. That being said, I do love a Halloween party where you can just have fun, okay? Spoopy. A lot of people did notice in all of those British stores, there weren't really that many cases of Marmite existing, which I was surprised with. That is a stereotypical British thing, but maybe it's because most people have realized it's just okay. That's opened my eyes. I feel like I've won the game now. It's not horrible, it's not great. It's just a product that's using an ingenious marketing ploy to get you to talk about it. Oh, also as a quick note on my comments about how every British person has owned a Sports Direct mug, I actually realized why I thought this. I've never owned one, and I've never been in a house that owned one, but every single job I've ever had in the UK, every office I've ever been in from the 7 or 8 jobs I've worked at in London, has had 1 or 2 giant Sports Direct mugs. So that is actually my case right there. Every job I've had, every office has one. Correct me if I'm wrong. Now, for those wondering where my what does an American sweet shop look like in the UK video coming, it is coming. It's just those types of videos I want to produce really well, so it takes me a bit more time to gather the content. So hopefully that's coming in the next month or so, along with the inevitable flat tour that's always on its way. Anyway, I'll see you guys next week. Thanks for watching. Goodbye. I'm an American man without a real kettle. Many of you Brits say that my girlfriend must have settled, but hey, that's not nice. Just 'cause I don't like tea doesn't mean you or my GF don't subscribe to me.